Oh, yeah, looks like you joined again twice, Carl, but that's okay. I'll make both of your profiles. And we're seeing some of our attendees coming in now, so just give them a few minutes to come on in. So I'm going to wait just a couple more minutes just to give our other attendees time to come on in. But we are recording for sure, so. So I think it's time for us to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Office of Neighborhood Coordination's latest virtual Lunch and Learn. I'm Vanessa Baca, the ONC manager, and it's my pleasure to welcome our panel speakers and our attendees. We'll get started shortly as other attendees are still entering the Zoom room. I would like to request that attendees type their questions into the chat function, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. This Lunch and Learn is being recorded, will be uploaded to the ONC's YouTube channel, and will be sent out in the weekly e-news for those folks who couldn't attend. I am very pleased to welcome Amos Arber and Carl Christensen of the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority today. Amos, a proud Albuquerque native, brings more than 25 years of hands-on experience in landscape design, installation, and maintenance. He holds a master's degree in landscape architecture and currently works for the Water Utility Authority as the Water Conservation Program Manager. As a certified arborist and former xeriscape inspector, Amos has helped over 1,000 residents and businesses transform their landscapes, creating healthier, water-wise outdoor spaces across the community. Very glad to have you here, Amos. Carl Christensen is the xeriscape inspector for the Water Utility Authority. With over 20 years of experience in the landscape industry, he helps Water Authority customers understand how to convert their existing lawn into more water-efficient xeriscape of desert-friendly plants and get a $3 per square foot water bill, even better. Carl also writes articles for the 505outside.com website, organizes webinars, and performs outreach for the Water Authority at various events around Albuquerque. So again, welcome, Amos and Carl. Very nice to have you both here.
Great. Thanks, Vanessa. We appreciate you inviting us to this webinar. We're excited to go over water conservation with the participants.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I was excited when you reached out to me. I was really looking forward to having this topic. I know it's very timely due to the fact that we are going into the hot summer months. And then I know there's been a lot of press around the fact that the river is quite low. So I think that, again, like I said, this is very timely. So I'll go ahead and I'll start with a basic question that maybe a lot of folks might not know. Where exactly does Albuquerque's water come from?
Great. Thanks, Vanessa. Yes. So we have what we refer to as a redundant water system. So we have our fantastic aquifer that the city of Albuquerque has been pulling from the history of the city, as well as our San Juan Chama drinking water project. And so in a good year or a normal, quote, normal year of snowpack and river levels, we use about 70% of our drinking water comes from the San Juan Chama drinking water project. And then the remaining part comes from the aquifer, which we like to refer to as our savings account. And so, as you can imagine, we prefer to use water from the San Juan Chama drinking water project. And in times of drought, like this year, we will need to rely a little bit more heavily on our savings account or our aquifer. Now, the history of water use and water conservation in Albuquerque is an incredible success story. Back in the early 1990s, our gallons per capita per day, which is the measure that we use to understand where our water usage is at, or GPCD as we refer to it, was at about 250. So that's all of the water that's used by the city divided by the number of residents, or the population. And so the amazing success story is, since the early 1990s, we've essentially cut that water use in half. Last year, our GPCD was 124. And I can bring up a little graphic stating that in the as we move forward in the presentation. But it's an amazing success story, and a lot of that is due to mainly our Albuquerque residents doing a great job in conserving water, or another way to say this is using their water more efficiently. And this is through things like the xeriscape conversion rebate, where we have an incentive for folks to transition high water use lawn that they don't really use or enjoy very much into healthy xeriscapes. And we'd love to dive into the details of that later in the presentation, and other rebates and incentives we've had, such as low flow toilets that in the past was a rebate that we used to have. Of course, now you can't buy a high flow toilet, so we no longer have that rebate. But Albuquerque residents have been incredibly responsive and done an amazing job in conserving water. And due to both the San Juan Chama drinking water project coming online in 2008 and the incredible amount of or increase in efficiency that Albuquerque citizens have done, our aquifer levels have actually been rising. So it's an incredible success story. So our bank account is growing, and the idea is to try to save that water for times of need for future generations.
That's a
So,
wonderful, like you said, it's a wonderful success story. That's great. I hadn't actually realized that. I think we hear so much in the news that about that we're in this situation of losing water, that it's really great to hear that, it's the situation is not quite as dire as it would be represented.
yeah, and I would also just tack on to that the Water Authority has a very progressive long-range long-term water planning. And so we have this great document that we're one of the only utilities in the entire country that has a 100-year water plan. And we refer to this as Water 2120. And every 10 years, this gets updated. We're actually in that process right now, and everyone can go to our website and check out that document. And it's like I say, there are other utilities that have a 20-year water plan or a 40-year, but we're one of the few that have a 100-year water plan. What this means doesn't mean that after 100 years we're out of water. It means that after 100 years we have a sustainable water supply.
Mhm.
So it's Albuquerque, although we are in the desert, and it is really important that we conserve water and use our water the most efficiently as possible, which we can talk about some ways to do that. We are not in this sort of doom and gloom situation that sometimes the media paints, or is the case for other communities that are in New Mexico that haven't participated in sort of long range planning.
Sure, sure. And also, I'd like to point out that, yes, it is due partly to the residents being more cognizant of how they use their water, but you have a very robust public outreach program, and I give you kudos on that because I follow a lot of your recommendations for my own home. So, and I get feedback from our neighborhoods that they are always very excited to get the communications from your communication staff about the construction work happening around the city. It's very beneficial for them, and also for people who are commuting through those areas. So I just wanted to give you some positive feedback on that. Good job.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
thanks a lot, Vanessa. And I would one thing that, water conservation, they like to say, is sort of like a three-legged stool, and one of those legs is outreach. And we're really one thing I might want to address to the attendees today is we're really have been increasing our in-person outreach this past year, and one of those things is giving presentations at monthly neighborhood meetings. So if any of the participants are interested, we are happy to participate and give a presentation in any upcoming neighborhood association meetings for your community or an HOA. We also have a lot of great printed materials that, if it didn't work out for us to present at one of the meetings, that we'd be happy to pass along to any neighborhood leaders. And something that we'll get into hopefully later in the today's talk is our award-winning website, the 505outside.com, which we have a associated newsletter, which over 130,000 people currently subscribe to. And the last thing I might just tack on to that is, of course, teaching our children is about water conservation and using water efficiently is the other part of it. And we have this incredible award-winning education program. And it involves, and we have some great web pages, and we have an incredible staff member, Jeffrey Tuttle, who's been a teacher for 30 years. And there's some really interesting programs that are involved with that program. And this includes puppet shows to kindergarten schools around town, in-person classroom activities, and then all of the fourth graders in Albuquerque at public schools go on a field trip to the Bosque to learn about the river and where our water comes from. So we're trying to teach future generations about the importance. And of course, they can have a lot of influence on their parents when
Yeah,
they see them not using water efficiently. So.
absolutely. That's great. I didn't actually know about that. That's really wonderful. I'm gonna make that recommendation to some of my family members that have kids in school. Thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, if um, one thing we're going to talk about later today is, about the drought, and one of the things that we're doing about that is hosting a series of webinars where folks can receive a $20 rebate for attending once per fiscal year. And we're really excited about this up year's coming webinars that we have scheduled, and one of them is actually going to be the puppet show that is presented to kindergartners as a way of kind of extending the outreach of that. So if folks want to participate that, we also record those webinars. And last year we had an incredible series of guest presented webinars, and those are up on the Water Authority's YouTube channel as well.
That's great. That's a really good resource to know about. That's something I can definitely share with our neighborhood folks. So thank you for that. That's really great. Um, Another interesting question that I got from one of our neighborhood folks, and I'm not sure that this is necessarily your purview or the state engineer, but how is water allocated within the city of Albuquerque?
Yeah, I guess I'll do my best to maybe answer that, but I would just say if folks are interested in really learning some details or doing a deep dive in we refer to as water resources, there are a couple of I work within the water resources division, so the division manager, or there's another my colleague Diane Agnew deals with environmental projects, water resources, and water rights. And if Vanessa, if you were interested in, if there was enough interest in having a real deep dive on our water resources and learning more about the Water 2120 long-term planning document, certainly we could arrange that.
Okay.
However, what I would say is, so it's not exactly my wheelhouse, but I would state maybe something a little bit differently in that. Um, so we have enough a water supply given our Water 2120 document to go through at least 100 years and still have a sustainable water supply. And those sources include, as I've stated, the San Juan Chama Drinking Water Project, our aquifer. And in that document, we talk about other sources, such as we have an existing what we call aquifer storage and recovery. So when we have water over the winter from the San Juan Chama Drinking Water Project, we inject that back into the aquifer to further expand our savings account and save that for the future. As you can imagine, water stored underground is not going to evaporate like it might in a reservoir or some other type of storage. We also in the future are looking at capturing stormwater and expanding that effort, as well as some other sources of water that we use are what we refer to as non-potable, or more commonly reuse. So a little over half of the water that's used by Albuquerque is is indoor water use, and that is all treated and recycled in one way or another. A big part of it is used for our irrigation or our athletic field. So there's quite a number of parks and APS facilities that use reused or non-potable water to irrigate their athletic fields. And so that's a great use of water. And then the remaining portion of that non-potable water is returned back to the Rio Grande as part of our water rights and compact with and part of our permitting. So all of the this is maybe a not all widely known by folks. So all of the water used indoors is recycled in Albuquerque. And so this is one reason why we don't, although it's fine for people to do this, we don't particularly push gray water or that type of system where other parts, folks that are only reliant on wells, that becomes more important. So all of the water that you use inside is recycled in one way or another.
Okay.
However, you can guess the other portion of the water that is used outdoors is obviously only used once. So for
Hmm.
instance, when you water your backyard lawn, that water is just used once. And this is why the water conservation program is almost completely, with one exception, focused on conserving or using water more efficiently for your outdoor water use because it's only used one time. And so it becomes particularly important and why we have so many programs and incentives focused on trying to conserve and use water outdoors more efficiently.
Yeah.
And then just the way that the water, maybe not exactly your question, but in case folks are curious, about 45% of all of the water used by within our service area is used by residential accounts, and then the remaining amount is used by commercial, industrial, and institutional accounts.
Okay. That's
So you
good.
kind
That's
of get a
really
sense of how the water, maybe not, is how the water is used within our service area.
okay. No, that's
Yeah.
interesting. That makes a lot of sense. I'd heard that institutions like the University of New Mexico is a significant, user of water resources. I don't know if that's something you can speak to or not, but that was one of the
Yeah,
questions that I had gotten from a neighborhood person.
sure. So there are UNM, there are some folks around town that do have their own wells
Mhm.
and that are not part that don't get their water directly from the water authority. And UNM, the hospital gets their water from the water authority. However, the main campus, they have their own wells and their own water treatment system. So, and there are some other folks around town that are significant water users, namely a number of golf courses that have their own wells, and they are under the purview of the Office of the State Engineer
I see.
because of that. So, however, and we might also address that, of course, a lot of people in the valley have what are sometimes called shallow irrigation wells. And I might just address that briefly in that I think it's an understandable thought that, with I have this, I bought this property and it has this old shallow irrigation well. I'm going to fire that up to just flood irrigate my yard or lawn.
Mhm.
However, that and people think that is a free source of water. You don't necessarily have a direct bill. Of course, your electric bill might be a little bit higher from the pumping. However, I would like to encourage folks to not consider that as, quote, free water because there is a cost to it, especially in the valley wells, they are connected to the river in the way that the aquifer works and the way that the water table works within the valley. So if there's thousands and thousands of shallow irrigation wells in the valley, and they're all like little straws sucking water, and it does affect the river levels. And so when the river levels are lower, that means there's less water for A, the San Juan Chama drinking water project, and B, for our beautiful irrigation ditches and farmers that support sort of the beauty of the valley and all of the beautiful giant cottonwoods and the sort of the culture of the valley. So it is important, although folks should, are welcome to use those and should think about it. Um, I think it's important to still consider using that water in a way that respects its usage and to follow the water authority's irrigation guidelines, which is one of the great resources that we have. So I see people just turning on their well and flooding their whole yard with a big blue, hose. But that's not a great use of that water because it does have effect. It affects the wildlife. Obviously, last year the Rio Grande went dry, and there's a bunch of endangered species, and then the farmers that use the ditches and so on and so forth. So it is important to try to use those shallow valley wells efficiently, just like you would your water from the water authority.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yes, that's interesting about the wells you were talking about in the North Valley. I had never actually even known about those, so that's fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of shallow irrigation wells in the valley that have been around for a long time
Yeah.
and are a great resource. Um, and there are some neighborhoods that, have wall-to-wall lawn that use well water because it's less costly
Mhm.
compared to using it from the water authority. However, there is a cost, and so it's important to try to use that efficiently as well.
I agree. I agree. Um, what should residents know about water conservation as we head into the hot summer months?
Yeah, I think we want to talk a lot about resources that we have related to water conservation. A couple of things that people should keep in mind are various things. So I mentioned that using water outdoors is really our focus because it's only used once, or consumptive as we refer to it. And we have some great resources to help folks try to use that outdoor water in a more efficient way. And these include lots of rebates that we have and other resources. And so, but beyond some of those projects, what everyone should try to remember to do is to follow. We have our water waste ordinance. So what this involves is twofold. Is one, people are probably very familiar with the time of day restrictions. So
Yeah.
we have that you're not supposed. The ordinance states that you shouldn't use sprinkler irrigation between 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. And this is the beginning of October, April through the end of October. And that's because obviously it's hot and windy, and it's not a very efficient time to be spraying water onto your lawn.
Hmm.
However, you are allowed to use drip irrigation or water with a hose during those times if you need to. However, it's really best to water when it's cool and not windy. So if you do, and the other part related to our water waste ordinance is we rely on citizens to help report water waste or fugitive water. So if you see a broken sprinkler or water running down the street, um, we have a great way. We rely on citizens to report those incidences of water waste. And this isn't, I think at one point, some folks had the kind of wrong impression. We are often called the water cops, and that's really not what we're interested in doing. Most folks that if they're doing it right, they have their sprinklers going off at 3 or 4 in the morning, and when you're, which is when most people are asleep. And many well-intentioned folks, no one really wants to waste water or have a high water bill, but and so there's two things: is if you do notice water running down the street or water running during the season, during those restricted times, to please report it. And
Okay.
this isn't ratting out your neighbor or trying to, tattle on your neighbor. As I said, most folks just aren't aware that they have a broken sprinkler or that their controller is set incorrectly. And so we want to just notify folks. And this can help your neighbors save water for future generations as well as save money on their bill. So we have a hotline that folks can report water waste on,
Okay.
and it's
I'll type that into the chat actually.
sure. Yeah, it's 842. When you're ready, let me know. And
Okay.
I can bring up,
You were going to say you could bring up.
yeah, let me just share my screen real quick with
Oh, yeah, go
a
ahead, please.
page that we have, if that's helpful.
Yes.
See, let me
Great.
get that going here. Um,
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can
yes.
hear you, Carl.
Oh, good, good.
Okay.
And customers can also report water waste on our website. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So you'll see here, if on the screen that I'm sharing, this is a page on our ABCWUA.org website.
Okay.
And there's two ways of doing it. We have this great hotline here that you can call in and leave a message. And it's best if you, when you call in, to note the time that you saw it running, the address, and a little description of what was going on. And that helps our specialists go to visit that site. And if you do make a report, which we want to encourage everyone to do, folks receive a warning letter. They don't immediately receive a fine. And then we also have this great way of reporting waste online here. You can click on this link, or we have this QR code if folks want to check that up. These are available on our website, and you can use this on your phone. It's really handy, and it'll pinpoint exactly where you are, and you can upload photos, which makes it even more effective for us to follow up and understand exactly where that water waste is occurring. And so this is a great way. I'll stop sharing for the moment. This is a great way of helping your neighbors to conserve water. As
Yeah.
I say, most folks, they have it's going off in the middle of the night, and it's so important to maintain and check your irrigation system, which is the second part that I'll get into. So
Yeah.
help report water waste. One broken sprinkler running for over a month can use as much water as an efficient household for an entire year. So it
Wow.
becomes really important to report water waste. And again, you're not ratting out your neighbor, you're just helping them to know that they have an issue, and
Sure.
we will reach out to them. Yeah.
Can you repeat that, the number to
Oh,
report
sure.
water waste one more time?
It's 505-842
Mm-hmm.
9287, option 4.
Got it. I went ahead and typed it into the chat for our
Great.
attendees if they want to reference that as well.
Yeah, that's great. And so reporting water waste is one great thing that would we need help with everyone to do. And as I started to allude to, is checking that your irrigation system is working properly is the next most important thing that you
Yeah.
can do. So we have this saying called walk the line. So because sprinklers are often going off in the middle of the night, what we encourage folks is at least once a month, or maybe more frequently if you have an older or a drip irrigation system, to turn it on during the when you're around, and inspect and make sure that all of the components are working properly. It's so common for our powerful sun to beat up these plastic components in a system, or just like anything else in your house, you expect to get about 20 years out of your irrigation system. You don't expect your water heater, or your roof, or your dishwasher to last forever. However, people kind of tend to forget about irrigation systems. They're underground, they're running in the middle of the night. And so it's really important to turn on your system at least once a month and walk the line and double check that you have everything is aligned correctly, that something isn't shooting in the wrong direction. And a lot of these, make a lot of these repairs is fairly straightforward and are simple do-it-yourself projects. And then the second part of that is making sure that your irrigation controller, a lot of folks have an automatic irrigation system. They have a controller, it's usually in your garage, and to make sure that that is adjusted properly for the season. So we have seasonal watering advice that we give. A lot of people are probably familiar with the old water by the numbers, the 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. And in fact, we've recently been kind of revamping that. The important thing to know about that is that advice is particular for your sprinkler, for your lawn, is the 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, where everything else, all of your trees and shrubs and drip irrigation, everything else, we have seasonal irrigation advice.
Yeah.
And that is available on our website that I want to make sure people are aware of, which is the 505outside.com.
Let me type that in. 505outside.com.
Correct. Yeah. And so that's a water authority website, but it's specific for irrigation, for caring for your yard and garden, and our rebates. And so at the end of your questions, we'll maybe transition into delving in a little bit more into that resource, which has won a number of awards, and Carl can talk a little bit more about that. But it's a great resource. And so making sure your irrigation controller is set correctly for the season is the next most easiest thing that citizens can do to make sure they're using water efficiently outdoors. Those irrigation controllers can be a little bit tricky. They're all a little bit different. This maybe shows my age, but it used to be the joke of like how to set the clock on your VCR. It's kind of like this really awkward and difficult thing, and they're often in
Well,
the
that
dark.
brings back memories.
Yeah, yeah. And so, given that, and actually now, one rebate or one great way, if you're having trouble with your old irrigation controller, they can often have what we call ghost programming or mystery programming, or multiple start times. And so the thing is coming on several different times, kind of unintentionally, and using 3 or 4 times more water than you actually meant it to do. This is really, really common. And so if folks have questions about their irrigation system, or they're not sure what's going on with it or how to program their controller, or they're seeing something running, or they're seeing wet spots where they shouldn't be,
Mhm.
and they don't know where to go or how to get started, we have a couple of great resources. One is our email address, which is askanexpert. So it's all one word, askanexpert@abcwua.org. And if anyone can send any question they have related to irrigation, plants, rebates, anything like that. And if there's any neighborhood leaders, to please consider putting that in your newsletters or communications with your community. This is a great free resource that any time of the day or night you have a random question about what tree I should plant, how I should water my tree, or that's a great place to submit those questions. Or if folks would like to have a free irrigation consultation, that's also something that we offer. So you can send a note to that email address, the Ask an Expert, and we will get back and try and schedule a time to come out and review your system and make sure it's being programmed correctly and suggest improvements to that. But regarding the irrigation controllers, there's this great new technology out there called smart irrigation controllers. And what these are your irrigation controller. And I said I would delve into this a little bit later, but I'll just share my screen really quickly about this. Let's see, let me do that. And then I'll after you're done with your questions, I'll kick it over to Carl to be able to get into some of our other resources. So we have, again, this is on our 505 Outside .com website. We have a number of great rebates, and one of them are for smart irrigation controllers. And these are really neat because they use local weather data to set the run times. So once it's just a matter of unplugging the wires of the old one and plugging in the wires of the new one. A really simple weekend DIY project that has a really high return. And once you set it up, you program in what kind of soil you have, how big the lawn is, what kind of sprinklers, so on and so forth. But once you get it set up properly, it's kind of like set it and forget it. And it's kind of like your thermostat. Once you get it set to the right way, it just operates on its own, and it uses and responds to the current weather. So if it's going to rain, hopefully we get some good rains this summer, it will not run. It'll skip those times. Or if it's too windy, it won't run because it's not an efficient time to use your irrigation. Or as it starts to get cold, it will not run or create ice. So they're relatively inexpensive. And we have a rebate. You can get 25% up to $100 back on your water bill for installing one of our qualifying models. The other really nice thing about it, I talked about walking the line and how important it is to check your system, especially with drip irrigation. Rodents like to chew on the parts, and the parts can get messed up very easily. It's rather than having to run back and forth to the garage and lean over your washing machine to turn on the system to check to see if it's running correctly, you can just directly from a really intuitive phone app right there, right in front of the sprinkler, turn it on right in front of you. And it makes it, I think that alone, the convenience of that makes it worth to consider installing one of these smart controllers.
Okay.
We've also created a purchasing and setup guide. And so I'm sharing here, you can see we talk about some things to keep in mind and considerations. And we have this guide that talks about some of the most popular smart controllers that were purchased in Albuquerque and the different functionality they have. So this is a great resource that we have for our customers if they're interested in purchasing a smart controller, which is a really great way of doing it. We've seen some massive savings on folks. We did a pilot program where we took 100 of the high water users, residential water users in Albuquerque, and gave them a smart controller, and we saw incredible savings. On average, people saved over $600 a year on their water
That's
bill. So
amazing.
this can pay for itself within a year plus the rebate, and it makes it much more convenient,
Mhm.
particularly if you have a lawn or you are a high water user. You can see really big savings on these. So this is one of the other great things that people can do to help conserve water outdoors this summer. And some of the other things that we suggest we can get into a little bit later, or Carl can talk about some of our other rebates related to
Mhm.
irrigation and transforming your lawn if you're not using it. But so those are, hopefully I answered your question
Yeah,
about that.
very
Yeah.
much. Speaking of rebates, one of the questions
Yeah,
that I did get from one of my neighborhood folks is, do you offer rebates for people who use rain barrels?
we do. And so I'll share my screen one more time here. Um, So again, this is our 505outside.com website, and there's a tab at the top that you can see here for rebates,
Yeah.
and you can see all of the different ones here. And here's that page brought up in front of you. And these are the four categories in general of rebates we have for residential folks. So Carl will talk more about the xeriscape conversion rebate.
Mhm.
And since you asked it, we do have a rebate for rain barrels or cisterns, as they're sometimes called. This is based on how much, the rebate is based on how much water you're able to capture, depending on the size of the cistern. Um, and another thing to keep in mind for harvesting rainwater. So this would be referred to as active rainwater harvesting, where you're actively putting the water into a barrel or a cistern and reusing it. Another great way of harvesting rainwater is what's called passive rainwater harvesting. This is where you um, direct the water from your downspouts and other places from your roof and driveway into like a rainwater swale or a rain garden, or and that's a really great way of doing it. And you ideally it's directed towards a big mature tree, or you plant a tree within that low depression, and that's one of the best ways of growing a healthy and long-lived tree in Albuquerque. And in fact, Bernalillo County, their water conservation program, um, has an incredible set of resources on helping folks to understand how to install passive rainwater harvesting systems, or rain gardens, as they're sometimes referred to. And they have a great series of videos and documents on the Bernalillo County Water Conservation webpage, as well as as I mentioned, we hosted a series of webinars last year.
Yeah.
And this one here that you can see, we had Bernalillo County. Oop, that's not it. We had Bernalillo County. Well, anyway, Bernalillo County hosted one of our webinars, and they went into the details of how to set up a passive rainwater harvesting system. So if folks are interested in using the supply from the sky, which is a great way of doing it, is to think about rain barrels can be great in certain situations. If you have concrete and other places, depending on the site, it can be a good solution. But we also encourage people to think about setting up passive rainwater harvesting in their yard. It can be it could be a beautiful feature, a great way to organize your yard, or a good component to consider as part of transforming a lawn into a healthy xeriscape, which Carl can talk more about. But since I'm on this page really quickly, I'll just mention the other general categories we have for rebates are for tree baits that I have here. And so what this is there's two parts to this, and it is for both the purchase of new trees that are on our list of qualifying trees. There's quite a few of them, 160 or so trees that qualify, as well as the care of existing mature trees. This may seem a little bit counterintuitive. Why is a water utility encouraging people to plant trees because you have to water them? But here's where it starts to make sense is something called the urban heat island effect. This is where areas in the city, because of all of the concrete, asphalt, rooftops, certain areas of the city, and there was some really interesting mapping done recently that they can be up to 9 degrees hotter than areas outside of the city or on the edges of the city or in other neighborhoods. And while, 9 degrees may not seem like a whole lot, it's a big deal for plants. For every 18 degrees increase in temperature, a tree needs double the amount of water. So what this means essentially is with the urban heat island effect, everybody has to water their yards more and everybody has to turn on their swamp cooler earlier in the day. So we want to encourage people to plant trees that begin to shade your yard and keep the city cooler in general. And the meager use that a tree uses far outweighs the benefits of the tree in both urban cooling, as well as trees have just a myriad of other benefits.
Oh,
Um,
sure. Yeah. We did a
yeah.
training a few years back of virtual lunch and learn like this with Tree New Mexico. And
Okay.
they
Yeah.
talked about their Neighbor Woods program, which is predicated on similar to what you're talking about. So yeah,
Yeah.
do you do any partnering with them or
We do actually. Yeah. Tree New Mexico is a great organization. And um, we do. For folks that receive a tree as part of one of those neighborhoods planting, they actually can receive a tree bait on the value of the tree that was planted. So although it doesn't actually cost the resident anything, Tree New Mexico works with those participants to help submit a tree bait for us so they can receive a credit on their water bill um, to help with the watering of that new tree that was just planted. The
right?
other part of the tree bait is that it's for the care of existing mature trees. And becomes really important. A lot of, especially as our climate gets warmer and drier, or the rainfall and snow becomes a little bit less predictable, there's a lot of folks that have large mature trees. And those are the ones providing the biggest or the largest amount of benefits, as you might imagine. It becomes a lot of folks aren't used to watering or caring for those trees because we've had more predictable snow or rainfall, but it does become important to start to water them or care for them by upgrading the irrigation system, mulching, or professional pruning. And so the tree bait can also cover professional tree care. And so that's the other portion of that. As I mentioned with the irrigation efficiency rebates, our smart controller, but we also have other rebates related to that. And these are some other great simple DIY projects that you can do in a weekend. And so some of those are installing these pressure rate regulated sprinkler bodies. All you have to do is dig down, unscrew the old one, install one of these guys. And what it has a pressure regulator inside the body itself. And that means that each and every single head gets the same pressure. Oftentimes, the one at the end of the line gets less pressure than the one at the beginning, and a little bit counterintuitive. Pressure within the city can vary kind of depending on the pressure band. Albuquerque, the Water Authority uses a gravity system, so certain neighborhoods have higher pressure than others. And a little bit counterintuitive that actually, if you have really high pressure, it actually makes your sprinkler system less efficient. You've probably seen someone's sprinkler going off in their yard and it's like this mist and this
Mm.
cloud, and that's
Yeah.
due to high pressure. It's kind of like, and it makes a really fine kind of misting water drop. But you can imagine if you're trying to throw a little pebble, you can't throw it very far compared to maybe a slightly larger size rock. And so having correct pressure. And of course, all of the components are designed at a specific PSI. So these sprinkler bodies help you get at an individual head the correct pressure, and they're relatively inexpensive, and it's a really simple thing to do. And the other part of kind of mate or pair with that are efficient sprinkler nozzles. You may have seen these going off. It kind of looks like these little streams of water, and they have a much heavier water droplet that isn't as affected by the wind, and it puts down the water. It applies the water at a much slower rate, about like 1/3 the rate of your standard sprinkler nozzle. And what this allows is the water to soak in before it starts to overflow or run off your lawn. And this becomes particularly important in compacted sites or if you have a slope. So these are some really simple weekend projects um, that we have rebates for, and so it's really simple to apply. You just have to make sure that they vary a little bit, but just be sure and save your receipts. And for some of them, you want to do that within 90 days. And I don't know if we're at a good place with your questions to jump into the xeriscape conversion or
Yeah,
transformation rebate.
absolutely.
And so I'll pass it over to Carl and let him talk about this. Is really our flagship rebate, where folks that have lawns that they're not really enjoying. Now, I like to say that the Water Authority isn't anti-lawn. Lawns are great. And of course, we have this incredible park system and that everyone can use, and those are great places to enjoy turf grass that you can recreate on. And of course, having a small patch of grass in your backyard that's efficiently irrigated and that you actually use and enjoy or supports large trees is a an efficient use of water. However, most very commonly we see two things is that there's an old irrigation system that's so inefficient that people end up watering to the brown spots
Yeah,
essentially,
yeah,
and they need to dump on more than double the amount of water that is actually needed to keep that grass healthy. And as I mentioned, irrigation systems have a lifespan of about 20 years, so it's important to go through and upgrade those components. And or a lot of people have a front yard lawn, and the only time that was from back in the day when we thought that we had this endless aquifer that was the size of Lake Superior, and many neighborhoods required lawn in the front and the back. And that's no longer the case. And we have a better understanding of the aquifer. So a lot of people have this front yard lawn and they only see it when they drive in into the garage. And so if you're not actually using that lawn and enjoying it for recreating or having kids play around or supporting big trees, we encourage folks to think about transforming it to a healthy desert-friendly xeriscape. And so Carl will talk about some of the misconceptions of what a xeriscape is, the requirements and qualifications for our xeriscape, which is at the highest it's ever been, and talk about some of the benefits that can be achieved with that. So with that, I'll
Mhm.
pass it over to Carl.
You
Thanks,
bet.
Amos.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I had some technical difficulties earlier, but hopefully they are ironed out.
They are. We
Um,
can see you and we can hear you.
oh, good, good. I'm feeling like a Luddite over here. I didn't even get to make my background fuzzy, so just ignore all this messy
That's
stuff.
okay.
Before I forget, I do want to recommend that people sign up for our newsletter. They can do that at the website at 505outside.com. You're just going to
Okay.
scroll to the bottom, and you'll see an orange box there where you can sign up today. And that's really just once or twice a month. We're not going to bombard you with 3 times a week of useless stuff. So this is just the best. It's about our events. It's got some great articles by local experts about plants and really everything that we're working on. As far as the xeriscape conversion rebate program that I do, that's for customers. If you have a lawn and you're considering replacing it with a xeriscape, call me first. Before you let the grass die, I need to go out there and see the grass, and I want to tell you all about the program in person. There is an online application too, and I can help you with that. But what it does, I go out, I see the lawns in place, and you remove it and you replace it with some desert friendly or native plants and trees, and then you can get up to $3 per square foot of lawn. I've had customers that say they replaced 2,500 square feet of lawn, so that was a $7,500 credit on their water bill. I
Nice.
think it lasted about 4 or 5 years. So that's a big incentive to help people, yeah, consider doing that. And also, I go out and I talk to them about what really a xeriscape is. A xeriscape is not just a gravel full of yard. I mean, rather a yard full of gravel with just two plants. I can talk to them about getting some large evergreen shrubs that do very well here, like rosemary and things like that, and also incorporating mulch and wood chips into their yard. And we have an additional rebate for mulch under the tree rebate program. So anybody that's purchasing and spreading mulch and wood chips in their yard is eligible for that same rebate, 25% off up to $100 each fiscal year, and that's going to be as a credit on your water bill. And the reason why we do that is mulch is a lot better for the environment. As it breaks down, it improves the soil because we don't put weed fabric under mulch. It's just the wood chips. It improves the soil as it breaks down, and it keeps the local environment cooler versus rocks that absorb heat and give it off. And so yeah, so there's always a rebate for mulch and trees, tree baits. But the Xeriscape program that I come out and talk to you about, I can point you to a lot of resources that that I know about and that are on our website. On our website, we also have some design templates for your yard. These were done by some local experts, people with decades and decades of experience in the industry in Albuquerque designing residential yards. So there are some templates on our website that I can point you to. And the other things that we do, besides the newsletter and the templates and the webinars, is I'm available for outreach. I'm happy to talk to neighborhood associations, and I'm also, and it's easier for me to say this at this meeting because we don't have 500 people, that I can go to your house as a free consultation. I can help you, like Amos mentioned about programming controllers. That can be one of the most frustrating things. So I can actually go and help you how to understand your controller, help you set it. If it's going off at multiple times, like Amos mentioned, we can figure that out. I don't actually do any digging, unfortunately. They don't let me do that. But I can use all my experience in irrigation and landscape to help you come up with a yard that you're really going to like, and give you some practical advice.
That's
So
fantastic.
yeah,
That's good to know. Does artificial turf count as xeriscaping? My guess is that it does not.
it doesn't qualify you, but it doesn't disqualify you.
Mhm.
So I have met with customers that want to replace their lawn, their real grass lawn, with artificial turf, and I'll go out there and I'll give them some ways to work around the program. If they put in some new shrubs and plants on the border of the old grass, then they can have a section of artificial turf
Mhm.
and it'll still qualify.
Okay.
And the reason why we don't incentivize artificial turf is it just gets so hot, and it really, you can feel it, the heat during the day, emanating off the artificial turf when it's in the sun. And
Yeah.
it's also, it's very difficult. You can't recycle it. Um, but I'm happy to have that discussion with anybody. I put my direct line in the chat. So
Okay, perfect. Yep.
I can help them work the program to come up with a solution to artificial turf. But we really do want to encourage people to plant trees and just to shade the ground, as Amos said. And another part of my outreach, as the grass in Albuquerque has gotten more rare, the mature trees are having a tough time. And I meet with clients and they say, well, why do I need to water the tree? I never watered it before. Well, you were watering it for 50 years with the sprinklers, and now we just have to set up a drip system um, to replace some of the water the sprinklers were providing, because the tree, besides being beautiful, can really help cool down your house. If it's on the west side or if it shades the roof, you can see a dramatic decrease in your um, air conditioning costs for electricity when you
Sure.
get some shade on your house. So we really do want to encourage people to water their mature trees and to email us at the Ask an Expert email with any questions on how to do that. We've got a lot of resources
Yeah.
that we can help with.
Yeah, you certainly do. You have a wonderful outreach program as well. I've done some work with Rachel Stone in your office,
Oh, good.
promoting a variety of water utility initiatives. So no, I can attest to the fact that you guys have a really robust outreach program in it, and I give you kudos and congratulations. I do.
Thank you.
We're getting close to the end of the time for the webinar. I did have one more question that had been sent to me from one of our neighborhood folks. This is looking toward the future. Are there any other possible water sources that could be utilized in the future if our aquifer, God forbid, does dry up? And this may not necessarily be a question for you all, but
Sure. I would encourage folks, as I described, to check out our Water 2120 long range planning document. But within that, it talks about a couple of things. So we're really interested in preserving the aquifer as much as possible. And as I mentioned, it has been rising over the past 20 to 30 years. And so it's doing really well. It's really quite healthy. As I mentioned, we're expanding our aquifer storage and recovery. So there's going to be new wells, injection wells coming online in the next number of years to be able to ensure that the aquifer is healthy and our savings account is growing, as we like to say, as well as at some point, depending on some of the state laws and so forth, we will start to look at capturing stormwater. So as you know, as some of the climate models, it's not so much that we will be receiving less precipitation, that they'll be coming more erratically. So sort of, as we know, these big deluges that happen rather than these nice consistent. And so being able to capture that stormwater and use it in one way or another will be something important that we're looking at. And then also expanding our non-potable or recycling the water in expanding that effort. So we'll be looking at connecting. We have two different systems at the moment, connecting them to a big loop across town, as well as taking advantage of some wells that are on the west side that have high arsenic amounts. And so we're installing some really high-tech filtration systems so we can begin to use those resources a little bit better. It hasn't, and eventually this would be far off into the future. We would be looking at using other non-potable, water for drinking water. So that's something that may have, it's very far off at the moment. But yeah, everything is, our aquifer is doing really well. And so we are anticipating it continuing to do well, 100 years or so into the future. And so, it's a little bit, we're kind of living in uncertain times, somewhat, but of course there are incredibly smart scientists that are doing climate prediction models. And really the other thing I like to talk about is that water conservation, you really can't think about it as a water source. So if we're able to conserve water, that's water that almost is a source of water because we're not having to find other sources of water. And I think it is important to know in terms of the kind of cultural values and the agricultural history of Albuquerque that the Water Authority does not include purchasing old pre-1907 water rights as part of their water resources. So this term, it's also often called buy and dry, that a lot of other areas use where they buy up agricultural water rights and then put that farmland out of circulation. That's not something that we're interested in doing. So we want to preserve the agricultural history and production in the Middle Rio Grande Valley. So yeah, so I don't know if hopefully that answers your question a little bit, but really the most important thing people can do is to use their water efficiently and to try to conserve water. And if we can get down to meeting our goal of 110 gallons per capita per day, I talked about how the story is we made it from 250 to 125 currently. So we've cut it in half, and we have a goal by 2037 to reach 110 gallons per capita per day. And we feel like if we can meet that goal, then we'll be in a really excellent place for our city moving well into the future for future generations.
I think it's a doable goal for certain. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did our panel or our panelists, did our attendees have any questions that they wanted to type into the chat? Okay. Well, Amos and Carl, I want to thank you both so very much for taking time out of your schedules. I know you both are very busy, but I want to just again give you kudos on your outreach programs. It was a pleasure having you both here on to talk about all of this. And I will work with Rachel more closely to see if I can further promote some of the initiatives and talk about the rebates that are available as well. And if there's any kind of other outreach that my office can help with in terms of promoting your programs and initiatives, please feel free to reach out.
Great, Vanessa.
Great.
Thank you so much for that. And we appreciate all your efforts and working with these neighborhoods becomes really important. And we have been reaching out to some of the neighborhoods that you've suggested to
Right.
participate in their neighborhood meetings, and some of those have come to fruition. So we really appreciate that, and
Good.
we'll keep communicating about that in the future.
Yeah.
And just to mention finally that we did just as of last week go into an official drought for the Water Authority. We have a means of determining that. And so we will be offering these drought webinars where folks can receive a $20 rebate for attending those. And they have some great tips. And so that's one great thing that people can do to learn about
Mhm.
our resources and promote those to their neighborhood.
I'm happy to help promote that as well. So
Okay, great.
Great. Thanks,
well, thank you
Vanessa.
both so much. Have a
All
great
right.
rest of your afternoon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending.
You bet.